that Chair Allen is not able to be here today, so I have the honor of chairing in his absence. And it's also good to see the folks that we have here in person. And I'd like to go ahead and start by doing the Pledge of Allegiance, if we can stand up quickly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. So I'll just make a couple of points here. First, just so everyone knows, our meetings, audio and video are being live streamed on the COG website. Additionally, we have a very nice lunch that's been provided today from Chef B. Mills, originating from Silver Springs, Maryland. So I'll pat my colleague here on the right. This local catering company was founded in 2007 and continues to serve this particular region. So I've had the opportunity to have a couple of bites, so very, very, very good. What I'd like to do is go ahead and move now into our executive director's report, and I'll turn it over to Director Clark Mercer to give his report.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
This is going to be the highlight for everyone. So Mayor Wilson, get ready here. We're going to start with Mayor Wilson and Bike to Work Day. I saw Mayor Wilson in Alexandria at one of our pit stops. We had more than 100 pit stops throughout the region and over 14,000 folks participate just a couple weeks ago on Bike to Work Day. And that's run by COG's Commuter Connections. They organized that with the Washington Area Bicyclists Association. So a big thank you to our staff here and our partners around the region for pulling off a terrific Bike to Work Day. Couple highlights for you, events that have happened and events that are coming up. In a couple weeks in Atlanta is the National Association of Regional Councils annual conference. And Paul Desjardins is receiving the Lifetime Achievement Award, the President's Award at the NARC conference. So Paul has been with us, has recently retired for 40 years, started here at COG in 1984, and everything from activity centers to our housing targets to the region's efforts around HQ2 and Region Forward. All of those were efforts that Paul helped lead. So really neat that he'll be recognized. He'll be down there in Atlanta along with myself and Tim Canan from his staff. On June 22nd, we'll get this note out. You may want to join us. It's a return of what was a traditional event for COG every summer, the annual cookout for staff. It'll be at Fort Hunt Park off the GW Parkway in Fairfax County on June 22nd. I'll get that note out. We have about almost 90 folks, family members registered to come out. So we're excited for that. On June 29th is Splash, brought to you by the Anacostia River Keepers. So this is a pretty neat event because COG has done a lot of work over the years with the district, with Maryland, to help clean up the Anacostia River. And it's at that point now where folks can go swimming in the river. So there's a big splash-in event. Steve Bieber will be there representing our water team. I will be there. We'll jump in together on June 29th. So that's right. Yeah, look for the social media on that. It'll be impressive. July 19th and 20th is our COG board retreat in Cambridge, Maryland. We'll get, I think if you're RSVP'd and coming, we have a really strong turnout, one of the stronger turnouts that we've had. So it's going to be a great time in Cambridge there on the water. A couple of notes on that. You will be getting soon-ish a note from Monica and our team. We are working with our friends at Deloitte to do an icebreaker type event for the first couple hours of the retreat. It involves a business chemistry assessment. It takes 5 to 10 minutes to do it online. And our senior staff did this. We had a one-day retreat at Deloitte a few weeks ago. And admittedly, I went in a little, not cynical, but curious about this business chemistry assessment. It's all about kind of personalities, how you work well, what some opportunities are to work with different personality types. It was a real eye-opener for those of us on staff to see what different personality types we have here, how best to get the most out of our own personality type, but also how to work with folks that are different. So I asked, in order for it to be a worthwhile exercise, please fill out this assessment. Like I said, it takes 5 to 10 minutes. And they're good at reminding folks if you haven't taken it. So we'll stay on top of that. We will talk transit at the retreat and Metro. We're going to get an update on DMV moves later in the agenda. But that is something that we will talk about on that Saturday. And on that Friday, we will get a report from the Department of Commerce, the Economic Development Association, EDA, and we'll be talking economic development districts, EDDs. There are many of them across the country. This region is noticeably absent from that designation. We are not designated as an EDD. So when your individual counties or cities apply for grants from Department of Commerce from the EDA, you are 5 times more likely to receive a grant if you are part of an EDD where the region has an overall economic development plan on file with Department of Commerce. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and gauge interest from our members about pursuing that kind of designation. Couple more highlights and then I will wrap up. We've got a podcast up on water quality, and that's our Think Regionally podcast. We talked to Montgomery County Councilman Ms. Gonzalez, our COG Chesapeake Bay and Water Resources Policy Committee Chair, as well as our WSSC Water General Manager Keisha Powell, and our COG Anacostia Restoration Program Manager Fong Tru on the roles each of us play in protecting the region's waterways and drinking water. So please give it a listen. Your packet has a number of links, which obviously work better, the emailed packet, to press that we've gotten largely around the DMV Moves initiative, our homelessness report, which we'll hear about today, our battery management campaign, the region's tree canopy goal, and our street smart safety campaign. So a lot of great press has been generated based on the work that you all and our staff here have done. Every year, our Department of Homeland Security and Public Safety hosts the correction ceremony. This year was the 32nd annual wreath laying ceremony and honor guard competition at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial. And the event recognizes correction officers who have fallen in the line of duty. And so Vice Chair Lust, thank you very much for attending and providing remarks at that event this year. And the last event, you got an invite to it yesterday that I would note is a public safety gathering on July 9th at Catholic University. And this is co-hosted with COG, the Greater Washington Board of Trade, the Greater Washington Partnership, and the Consortium of Universities in the Washington metro area. And it's to look at the private sector's role in addressing public safety issues. One, hearing from the private sector, their thoughts and reactions to the public safety atmosphere in the DMV, but also proactively what they can do working with the public sector to improve public safety throughout the region. So Scott Boggs is here. He's our point of contact for this event. And the expectation and hope is that these organizations that I mentioned that are co-hosting will do so again throughout the course of the year to zero in on important topics where we not only need public sector, but the private sector nonprofits at the table as well. And with that, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report. I've been alerted that we will not be able to do any voting for the next few minutes in light of the quorum. We need some folks from DC to be present for that to happen. So we're going to probably go ahead and defer over the voted items that we have on the agenda. So if you're...
Chair Luss, could I ask a question?
Oh, sure.
Is that all right of our director? I just actually wanted him to just talk just a wee bit more about this last item and why it might be important for elected officials to come. I think often a lot of us, we see these emergency preparedness things and we think it doesn't apply to us. I think it very much does.
Yes.
And I'd just love to have you actually promote it a little bit more and explain why it's important. And I think everybody needs to be worried about the fall because I am. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you, Chair Garvey. And that's a great setup. So July 9th, I hope that you can come. I think Mr. Walkinshaw, we got an RSVP from your office yesterday that you're attending. So that's terrific. So it's,
Yeah.
I think kind of fundamentally what I hear from some of our folks in the private sector is, hey, we need to concentrate more on public safety. It's like, well, we're concentrating a lot on it, right? Our folks around the dais work on these issues every single day. We've got a public safety committee here, staff that runs 28 public safety programs on behalf of the region. We don't always do a good enough job sharing that information with the private sector and listening to their thoughts and observations on what's going on and then asking them to be better partners with us. So there's a series of panels It's not just going to be talked to. We're going to have folks participate that attend, and we'll get the agenda out to you shortly. We got the invite and the RSVP link up, but we've got a number of our police chiefs attending on July 9th, so you'll hear directly from them. We're also going to hear from some of our larger retailers and businesses in the region on what they're seeing day to day and what can be done to improve public safety.
I think that's great. I just hope that there'll be a little bit of a role for electeds. I think a lot of times these things happen and we're just, I mean, mostly we're supposed to stay a little bit out of the way, but I really feel, as you know, it's my thing, this is my last year. I really think that electeds need to have their own kind of roles and understand what their role is to play. And I think we do have a role. I just don't think it's very clear to us yet. And that would be helpful to have that as part of this sort of, I know it's for the private sector, but what is it that we need to know and do too? So thank you. I'm just going to keep pounding that same note over and over again. I apologize to everybody because I'll probably talk about it again. I think
no, it's well taken. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me now move to our agenda item number 7, which is specifically connected to the 2024 Foster Parent Appreciation. And pleased that we'll be recognizing the 2024 Foster Parents of the Year. And I'd like to have the Foster Care Advisory Committee co-chairs, Lisa Robertson and Dr. Regina Lawson, and to thank them for all their work and effort here. Foster parents are an essential piece to ensuring the youth in our region are safe and that their needs are provided for. Their willingness to open their hearts and homes to these children and to help them learn life skills, reunite them with their birth families, transition them to independence, and many other responsibilities is beyond commendable. I'm honored to help recognize the 2024 Foster Parents of the Year in our region for their dedication, their kindness, and their work on behalf of these very, very significant youth. You can read about the foster parents of the year from each jurisdiction within your individual board packet. And at this time, we have a video that will highlight this year's outstanding foster parents of the year.
Fostering is a way to enrich your life and enrich the life of a child. When you start to process things that you have going on that you think you can't do in conjunction with fostering, you'll see you can do both.
We're happy to have kids at home because it's a pleasant experience.
We cannot change the world, but we can make the difference in our community, in our family too.
It's rewarding to help anyone, but especially children, because it is our future. I don't want a child to be in foster care, but we're available, we have the space, and we're welcoming them.
I thought that I was going to be helping a bunch of children, but I ended up realizing that it's also a blessing to me, and you really have an opportunity to change the trajectory of someone's entire life by just literally opening up your home.
We really make sure we push every single one of our kids in this home to be the very best they can be. Every kid deserves love, whether they're here for one day or they're here for the rest of their lives. We love that they're all diverse and they can be that here.
Right now, this is a child that needed a safe place to stay. To see them be successful, to see them meet a goal that I had for them, that's the amazing thing to see, and I feel like I had a part in that.
Kids out here need homes. They need to know that someone is there for them and someone can help them and give them guidance. It's a great feeling that I can actually do that.
You don't look at it as a child, they're family. And a lot of the children that I fostered down through the years, they call me and we still like family. That's what it's all about.
Our family has grown leaps and bounds since we started this journey.
I wouldn't have known what shared parenting could bring, but in fact, some of their greatest joys are the adults that our children have brought with them and that we stay in community and connection with.
We're now a part of this big team that is coming together to watch these kids grow up and flourish. I hope that they grow up feeling that their childhood was great because they had people who loved them and cared for them, and they take that and they just run with it.
Again, thank you for that video, and to the foster parents for their commitment to supporting those that are in need. This is such important work, and I do appreciate seeing that and reading inside the packet some of the stories about what the foster parents have done is pretty remarkable. So again, want to congratulate all of the 2024 Foster Parents of the Year. After the meeting, staff will share the links to the video that we just viewed, in addition to the videos on each individual family, so that you can promote those within your respective jurisdictions. I don't know if there's any questions or comments here. Okay. Perfect. So we'll now move, I don't think we still have DC represented, so I'll continue with the agenda if that's okay. We'll move now to item number 8, which is the fiscal year 2025 work program and budget. So I will be turning this over to our Executive Director, Clark Mercer, and our COG Financial Officer, Chief Financial Officer, Julie Mussog, on the proposed fiscal year 2024 COG work program and budget. Following the presentation, the board will be asked to adopt a resolution, R16-2024, as recommended by COG's Budget and Finance Committee, to approve the FY25 work budget and program. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Mercer for him to start the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Lusk. I just got a note from Monica that perhaps we move into the homelessness agenda item with no action item needed on that for vote. And I know that DC's council session on their budget is starting right now, so we're following up with some of our members to see if they can call in.
Okay, so
we'll move to Hillary, and are you? Yeah.
Good afternoon. That was really a lovely video, and I'm happy to follow that with some information about our point in time count this year. Good afternoon, Vice Chairs Lusk and Collins and members of the board. Thank you again for the opportunity to present the results from our 2024 annual point in time count. I'm also looking forward to sharing some additional updates about our regional efforts to prevent and end homelessness. My name is Trina Van. I'm the Continuum of Care or Homeless Services Coordinator for Arlington County. I work with the Department of Human Services, who serves as the lead for Arlington's Continuum of Care. And I currently serve as a chair of COG's Homeless Services Committee. I want to thank all of the participating jurisdictions for their support and coordination, not just for the annual point in time count, but for all of the work that goes on throughout the year to addressing homelessness in our region, as well as providing data then for today's presentation. I also want to thank Hillary and COG staff for their work and highlighting our critical efforts that are underway in our respective communities, and the work that goes into this annual point in time report. Before diving into some of the data, I did want to offer a few points of context. We should note that after 23 years, this year's report does not include data from the city and county of Frederick. Following Frederick's merger with the Maryland Balance of State Continuum of Care in 2023, the results of their count, along with Charles County, should be shared by the state of Maryland. As you all know, the point in time enumeration is a one-day annual snapshot of the number of people experiencing homelessness across the region, those who are sheltered and unsheltered. This year, our point in time count was conducted on January 24th. It includes enumerating people experiencing literal homelessness, so single adults, families with children, and unaccompanied youth that are living in emergency shelters, transitional housing programs, also those who are sleeping in places not meant for human habitation, on the streets, parks, metro stops. And additionally, we highlight information about those who were formerly experiencing homelessness and are now living in permanent housing, such as permanent supportive housing, those who are supported with rapid rehousing and other targeted permanent housing for people experiencing homelessness. By way of some additional context as well, the primary means by which we conduct this count is by using our Homeless Management Information System, which is our HMIS. This is our database that our service providers and our communities use to track the people that are experiencing homelessness and the services that are provided throughout the year. For some communities also use a combination of paper surveys that are primarily used when we're conducting our unsheltered count and surveying folks that are sleeping outside, but largely the largely the use of HMIS is coverage by those experiencing homelessness and are in shelter, which in 2024, 85% of people experiencing homelessness in the count were in some form of shelter. I think we can move on to the next slide. Someone controlling the, oh, perfect. Thanks. So this is a table that compares the count of people experiencing literal homelessness by jurisdiction from 2020 to 2024. You'll see here in 2024, 9,774 persons were counted compared to 8,696 in 2023. 7 of 8 COCs experienced an increase in the number of people counted during this year's point in time count. Fairfax County was the exception, and we're the only COC to experience a 1-year decrease of 32 people. As it did in 2023, this points to a regional wide trend rather than what we may have historically seen, where there were variations across jurisdictions from 1 year to the next. This change represents a 9% increase compared to 2023 and a 32% increase from 2022, when the region recorded its lowest number ever during the previous 2022 enumerations. So we attribute this trend to a couple factors. One, we can't ignore the increasing housing costs across the region, but also we're faced now with the end of pandemic era protections, tenant protections, and emergency housing assistance that was provided by the federal government. And while the national economy are seeing rebounds in the post-pandemic era, our most vulnerable neighbors and those experiencing homelessness are not experiencing the same gains. Overall, the region noted a 3% increase in total number of persons counted as experiencing literal homelessness between 2020 and 2024 enumerations. So this regional total now exceeds the number of persons counted prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide. This table demonstrates the breakdown of household compositions. It includes the total single adults. It includes households without children. We also have the total number of persons in households with adults and children in families, and the number of households with only minor children or unaccompanied minors from 2020 to 2024. Since 2020, the region had a 9% increase in the total number of single adults and a 5% decrease in the number of persons in families. The trend of consecutive annual decreases in families experiencing homelessness was reversed in 2023, but we still remain below the number of families counted experiencing homelessness in 2020. Also to note, children represented 62% of all people counted in homeless families in the 2024 count. Next slide. In this slide, we're viewing the number of single adults in the region who reported meeting HUD's definition for chronic homelessness on the night of the count. So this definition, as I mentioned, is developed by HUD, includes certain required conditions. The person has to have a disabling condition, and they have to have been either continuously homeless for a year or more, or has had 4 episodes of homelessness in the past 3 years, and cumulatively equals at least 12 months. In 2024, 30 families were counted as chronically homeless. There were no unaccompanied youth identified in this subcategory of chronic homelessness. So largely this population is represented by single adults. Since 2020, the incidence of chronic homelessness has increased by 17%. Again, this mirrors the trend that we're seeing of increasing single adults experiencing homelessness in the region, but also points to a lack of permanent supportive housing to meet this need. Next slide. So our regional COCs have been analyzing and tracking demographic data on people experiencing homelessness, particularly by race and ethnicity, to really understand the disparate impacts that homelessness have, particularly on Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, and looking for ways to identify gaps that need to be addressed. For 2024, HUD adopted a number of changes that make it a little bit more difficult this year to be able to compare our demographic information to prior enumerations. Largely, in the past, race and ethnicity were separated, so people surveyed could identify both in a race category and an ethnicity category. Those are now being combined by HUD for homeless services. HUD has also introduced new options for respondents to choose from, including Hispanic as its own racial category, as well as Middle Eastern or North African. And the racial category for Black or African American also now includes those who identify as African. So as in years past, though we can't see the trend side by side in the same way, but also shown again here using the new race categories, we see that both single adults and adults and families are more likely to identify as Black, African American, or African. 69% of adults identified as this race compared to the region's population, where only 25% people identify as Black or African American, demonstrating again this disproportionate overrepresentation among persons experiencing homelessness. 17% of the respondents selected white as their racial and ethnic identity, and 11% choose white and Hispanic or Latinx as their racial and ethnic identity. And I just want to be clear that the analysis of race and ethnicity for understanding and addressing homelessness is to really name and address the root causes of these racial disparities among persons experiencing homelessness. These disparities reflect national legacy of institutional and systemic racism that occurs in housing, economic policies, and systems of care that now we still see lasting impacts for. But as a region and across all of our COCs, we've been working to build strategies, again, not only to assess for those inequities, but really aiming to end them in our housing outcomes. Next slide. In 2024, the number of persons who reported experiencing homelessness and having served in the armed forces increased by 9 people, or 3%. It's a relatively small increase across the region, but also, again, reflects that larger trend shared earlier. Compared to the count 5 years ago in 2020, however, the region has reduced the number of veterans experiencing homelessness by 20%. Half or 4 of 8 COCs saw reductions this year compared to 2020, and the overall reduction in veteran homelessness since 2020 can be attributed to those targeted resources from the federal government to assist veterans. Those resources, namely VASH vouchers, or the Veteran Affairs Supportive Housing and Supportive Services for Veteran Families, or SSVF, has really enabled communities to quickly identify veterans and help them move into permanent housing. I'll also reference the work that we're doing regionally later and spotlighting the work aimed to target veterans in our community specifically as we talk a little bit more about our future efforts to join community solutions in the Built for Zero initiative. Next slide. Thank you. So beginning in 2018, the region COCs noted that there was an increasing number of older adults experiencing homelessness. So this slide represents single adults experiencing homelessness during the 2024 count compared to the 3 prior years. It's also broken down by age group. You'll see the majority of single adults experiencing homelessness are between the ages of 25 and 54. However, there are a number of dynamics that we need to know about the segment of older adults represented in that 55 and older age group, particularly as we anticipate that group to grow as the baby boomer generation ages. So one thing to note is that older adults experiencing homelessness have medical ages that exceed their biological ages. So what that means is that they have age-related medical conditions such as decreased mobility, challenges in meeting their activities of daily living, cognitive and memory declines that are on par with housed counterparts who are 20 years older than them. And the average life expectancy for a person experiencing homelessness is estimated at age between 42 to 52 years, much lower than 78 years for the general population. It's critical that we continue to monitor this so that we equip both our homeless response and our housing solutions to meet the needs of these older adults. Next slide. So a lot of sobering news for our region based on the trends that I've shared with you to this point. But I did want to highlight really the impressive work that's happening across the region and across all of the COCs amidst some of that more sobering information. In this slide, we're seeing here how many people that were formerly experiencing homeless are now housed. I can't emphasize enough the importance of permanent housing as the solution to ending homelessness. This bar chart represents the increase in the overall number of formerly homeless individuals and families who have now been assisted into permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, or other types of permanent housing compared to the count in 2020. In 2024, there was a 57% increase in permanent housing placements compared to 2020, quite an achievement. So we have several levers to address homelessness, both the preventive side and the permanent housing side. The significant number of people that we were able to assist into permanent housing really helped to constrain the incident of homelessness in the region and help prevent it from growing unchecked since 2020. However, we can still see the impacts when the inflow, the people that are newly experiencing homelessness, is outpacing our ability and capacity to help people exit to permanent housing. We really should, however, celebrate the great work that's happening in all of our COCs to assist people that are otherwise experiencing homelessness into permanent housing. Next slide, please. So what does this mean for our community and our communities and our region and where we're going next? I'm really excited actually to bring this information. Arlington County has been a long partner with Community Solutions in the Built for Zero efforts. We started in 2015 with reaching functional zero for veterans. And now we're looking to do that at a regional level and taking this to scale across all of our continuums of care. As you know, and as you saw and heard, in my remarks, the point in time count is limited in that it shows us an important trend year over year, but it does not give us perspective into the actual work that happens daily throughout the year across our region. In fact, over a course of a year, each jurisdiction serves roughly 4 or 5 times the number of people counted on one day in January. Which is why I'm pleased to bring this information and these updates to you about our newly established partnership with Community Solutions at the regional level. By focusing on implementing systems change at this coordinated regional level, we're aiming to improve outcomes for people who are unstably housed or experiencing homelessness within each of our communities. Built for Zero, or the initiative, represents a methodology that helps communities achieve reductions in the number of people who experience homelessness. It's focused on developing quality by name data, meaning that every community knows exactly who is experiencing homelessness in their communities by name, and their path to housing can be updated in real time. With this by names list, each community is better able to match housing solutions with the needs of each individual. And then at the population level, it allows communities or COCs to prioritize limited resources, really test systems change, and understand whether their efforts are driving to overall improvements and reaching functional zero. And that's our goal here, looking to reach functional zero, which is a dynamic threshold, which essentially means that our housing placements are keeping pace with the people that are newly experiencing homelessness at any given time. So this graph that you're seeing on the slide here represents Bakersfield and Kern County, California's efforts to reach functional zero for the chronic homeless population. The dashed red line is their functional zero threshold, meaning that at any point in time, there are only 3 people actively experiencing homelessness that meet the chronic homelessness definition in their community. And the blue line shows how that over time, the trend in chronic homelessness decreased to achieve that goal. It doesn't represent all the hard work that happens behind the scenes around testing new strategies, getting resources to the table to meet the needs, but is one way to visualize the impacts that a region is taking to addressing homelessness in their community. Next slide. So COG began its discussions with Community Solutions in late 2023 and officially kicked off its partnership in January of this year. I mentioned we would spotlight veterans earlier again, and that is the population group that the Homeless Services Committee has chosen to begin with as our first goal to reach functional zero. For some of our communities who have already reached functional zero, our work remains the same. We will continue to work to sustain that functional zero goal, while the other newer communities start developing the processes and efforts to come alongside the existing COCs. COG's role will then serve as a backbone organization. It's the community solutions term that describes the role of COG as an organizer and a coordinator to really support COCs in the implementation of the different Built for Zero strategies to reach functional zero. Amazingly, Community Solutions is offering 3 years of pro bono technical assistance, which is really phenomenal, to COG staff and to the jurisdictions who are new to Built for Zero. COG is anticipating hiring another staff person this year to ensure that they have the capacity to implement that work effectively across the region. But really, this is going to allow our communities and our region to demonstrate the work that's underway year-round to prevent and end homelessness as a community. Next slide. So this slide just shows who are existing community solution partners with Arlington County, the District of Columbia, Fairfax County, and Montgomery County. And the 4 jurisdictions that are new to Built for Zero this year include the City of Alexandria, Loudoun County, Prince George's County, Prince William County. We're really excited to have them join this effort. Next slide. So I hope you can tell that I'm excited. I really have enjoyed being part of a Built for Zero community, but we also know it's a lot of work. The level of collaboration that's going to be occurring at this regional level now is complex. It will take time, but for the first 6 months, or the next 6 months, I should say, we're really going to help the new communities achieve quality by name data and establish those by names lists so that they can report on their active numbers of veterans experiencing homelessness in their community on a monthly basis. That will also lead us to the next action step that we have, which is formalizing our collaboration at a regional level with our partners at the Veterans Administration this summer. And we're really looking to strengthen those partnerships so that we can focus our efforts to the goal of reaching functional zero for veterans. In October, our plans are then to review our progress and establish a new 6-month action plan. And so we're just really eager to come back to this group to share how we're progressing as communities and as a region. So I've said all of these comments before during my remarks, but really just want to thank everyone for the time to share sort of the work that's underway, the more sobering information about the needs that are being presented in our community and where we need to go next as a region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wanted to just maybe ask one question, thinking about on the unaccompanied minors in terms of the numbers that we had for them. I couldn't quite understand that. Could you express to me what data we have around that?
So when we are conducting our enumeration on the night of the point in time count, we also identify any unaccompanied minor. So
Right.
anyone who's under 18 who's not associated with a family who's experiencing homelessness.
Right. And then in terms of the numbers for them, do you have any data that you can share, or maybe I can get that later? I'm just curious to know what that looked like.
Amanda, if we can go back to the slide that shows up there. So just we'll add Chair Lusk. So I just wanted to note the definition that the Department of Education uses is quite different than the one that HUD uses. So what we see in terms of the number of unaccompanied youth who were counted on the night of the count is very low, single digits. And we know that is in fact a significant, while we know the point in time is an undercount across the region, it's particularly significant for youth, which is why some of our other communities hold separate youth counts, which are different. They last over 2 weeks. They include, they have a broader definition to include people who are youth who are unstably housed, who may be couch surfing. Youth who are couch surfing do not meet the HUD definition of literal homelessness, and so they are not included in the count. And the traditional means by which the count is conducted is not necessarily conducive to being able to capture the youth who may not have a stable or regular residence. So, and actually, Amanda, if we could just go a further slide and one over, that's this one right here. Oh, sorry, no, back, almost. There we go. Yeah, so what we're seeing is there were 16 youth, unaccompanied youth counted at the regional level this year, when we know, if we look at the results from the District of Columbia or from Prince George's County or other counties in Maryland, we know that those numbers are hundreds, not less than 20.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. Let me see if my colleagues here have any questions. I'm happy to take those. Supervisor Bailey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Excellent report. Thank you so much. And I think I just wanted to comment that the focus on the veterans population is one that has been ignored for quite some time. So I think that's where we can have a greater impact as well, particularly with the changes that are made in the Veterans Administration. So I really, as a veterans wife, I really do appreciate that. But also understanding that that is a forgotten population also that we do need to lift and serve. So I really appreciate the decision on that. And the numbers that you've shown us are not so scary, but real, but not so insurmountable. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Chair Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to take us back to 3 pages, page 20 of the chart for adult single demographics that says 67% of the people who are in the homeless population are Black, African, or African American. Page 21 that says that although African Americans are 25% of the population, for the homeless families, they are 79%. I'm going to take us to page 22, second paragraph. Although Black people comprise 13% of the general population in the United States and 26% of those living in poverty, they account for more than 40% of the homeless population, suggesting that poverty rates are not alone, do not explain the overrepresentation. So I always believe in talking about communities of color or marginalized communities when it is appropriate. And I'm gonna say something that may not be very popular right now, even knowing I'm on the air. This is a crisis in the Black community. These numbers, homelessness is a crisis. In the African American community, we are on fire. And we cannot sit here and talk about communities of colors and BIPOCs and all that when we see the numbers that say 80% of families are African Americans. 80%. That is in that, and while it does talk about it, there's no answers around it. I am literally, this is so upsetting to see this. And I would take this back to my board that's not doing a great job in saying yes to housing and not doing a great job to saying yes to affordable housing. But I don't think that we can sit here and just state the problem We have got to get solution focused as it pertains to African American families. I am here to be part of that solution, whatever that solution may be. I offer myself up on any board or any committee or any, call me at 2 a.m. I don't care, because we can have a lot of discussions, but there's no way we can talk about other populations, be they veterans or whomever else, and not look at these numbers and say that something's going on in this region and in this country as it pertains to Black Americans, and not all be on fire about this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair Randall. I'd like to now recognize Councilwoman Stewart.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to echo what Chair Randall said and the importance of looking at the disparities. And I know the working group went through a process with looking at racial equity that was reported on, and want to make sure we keep that a focus moving forward. Ms. Chapman knows I am thrilled and so excited about the work and the Built for Zero work that's going to move forward. I had a question on the focus on veterans. I know a number of years ago, one of the barriers had been because many of the programs for veterans excluded those who are dishonorably discharged. And some of those dishonorable discharge are for very minor things, and that actually also has a racial component to it as well. Are we still facing that, and are there ways maybe COG as an entity could come together and actually advocate so that the programs do not disqualify dishonorably discharged veterans?
That's a really important question. I think we're still in that process of really understanding and assessing our own local jurisdiction strategies to address veteran homelessness and fill in gaps as well. Though my understanding is the same, that there is limitations to some of our veteran affairs resources, housing resources for that population. We also supplement at the local level other types of resources for those who are identifying as veterans. It's part of this by names list that really helps us sort of think about targeted solutions for every person based on their needs. But I think that's a great point to some of our next phases of collaborating with the Veterans Affairs and highlighting that need again and talking through sort of what are our approaches there. Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Bailey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, again. And Chair Randall, thank you so much. My heart was, mine was there, but veterans came out. So I thank you so much for bringing that to the fore. One of the things that I wanted to mention also was when Hillary and I, when I first came on COG, she's working on this, and we segued to mental health. And now we're back where, at our home base. And I wanted to just put out in the atmosphere, both with what Chair Randall said, and as well as the veterans piece, the mental health component in this as well. Because one of the things that I saw and experienced when I first became an elected official, being in the 10 cities, is sure there are basic needs that are there, but also there's a mental health component that we overlook as well. So I just want to put that on the radar with both our disenfranchised communities, our Black communities, but also with the veterans piece as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions for any of the members that are online? I'm just looking up right now. I guess it's safe to say I do not see any raised hands or questions. So, okay. Ms. Ashton, please.
Thank you very much for this comprehensive report and all the work that you're doing. I think the whole nation is grappling with housing and the unhoused and how to better care for them and be a supportive society. I do want to also echo it's not only a crisis, but it's an emergency. And I do believe that this racial equity piece, particularly among the Black population, we can do better and we need to do better. And we need to huddle and fix this. This cannot be the same data, right, that we see year after year, and it has been. We are in charge in terms of policies and things that we can do, and we need to all put our minds together. There are some other jurisdictions across the country that have some interesting models, having looked at some of the things that LA is doing and others. There are people who are seeing the needle being moved, and I think we need to learn and apply those principles here. But this should not be acceptable to see this next year. And that's not all on anyone here. It's all of us to do it. There were two things I wanted to also flag. One is I'm happy to see the reduction in families. I'm wondering at the way our social services system is set up that a lot of support is geared towards families. And there are people who are left behind who do need help as well. I do understand why we support families, and I continue to support families, but we can't not look at other people. The second thing I have seen in a variety of jurisdictions that for the unhoused services that are provided, a lot of times they're overnights, but then during the day they're out. And how can we fill the gap with training and support to help people? I know that Urban League played a huge role during different times of our national history, but it seems like we need to go back to providing more support to get people the help they need, particularly when they have to leave some of the facilities by a certain hour. The other aspect I wanted to consider is just foster youth. When they age out of the system, I know in our city, we are leveraging some HUD funds to provide housing, but that is another population, usually tends to be, again, Black and brown people that are also being impacted there. But I just wanted to see if that's a consideration that we have to consider. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman Ashton. I'll then ask for Mayor Reed.
Thank you. We just completed a year's worth of work. Fairfax City created a homelessness task force, and that grew out of a land use vote to build 54 units of permanent supportive housing in the city of Fairfax at Fairfax Circle. And in order for that vote to take place, one of our city council members made a commitment to pulling together a homelessness task force. And so on that task force, we had 3 business representatives, we had 2 council members and myself, we had 3 nonprofits who do work in our city, and we had 6 city residents from different neighborhoods in the area in the city that is most impacted by homelessness. So after a year and doing community outreach, doing listening sessions, we have 35 recommendations to make. A presentation will be made to City Council at a City Council meeting June 25th. We prioritized 10 of the 35, but those 35 recommendations are actually on our city's website, fairfaxva.gov. You can look for our engage page and look at the 35 recommendations we have come up with for our city. Part of this, we had different subcommittees. One of them was a data subcommittee that went out and spoke to 50 unhoused people in our community to find out more specifically why they were unhoused. We also ended up talking to other jurisdictions, including Rockville, Maryland, Myrtle Beach, Charlottesville, Virginia, and other communities who have programs that are farther ahead of where we are. So we have invested a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of, community resources into trying to figure out why this population is unhoused, figuring out what we can do in order to meet the need. There is no homeless shelter in central Fairfax County. In Region 4, there is no homeless shelter. So the fact of the matter is we have no place to send people. It's just that simple. We have a day program, the Lamb Center, that's been there for 34 years. It closes at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And we do have a fare-free bus. And I'm just going to say this about all of these things. It's interesting how the narrative gets created around things like a fare-free bus and the stories people are trying to tell about why people are coming to Fairfax City, not that there are people already there living in Fairfax City, but why they come there. And that is a very difficult thing to manage. I will just tell you, because we're in the middle of trying to manage it. People conflate crime and people who are unhoused. That is a very, very obvious story that is coming out of my city at the moment. people don't understand or refuse to understand the nature of poverty and how the amount of poverty, lack of housing contributes to these cases where it's almost intractable. It's not that we have a huge number of unhoused people, maybe 200 in our city, but the fact that there are encampments and the dialogue over what to do about 19 tents in our city, the fact that we have chronically unhoused people who sit out in front of the Wawa or who create havoc in the CVS, if you haven't seen that story today, all of this narrative also makes it very difficult to solve these problems. Yesterday, I took a tour of the jail. It was a pre-planned sort of thing. I took a tour of Fairfax County Jail. I spent time with the sheriff. I was there for 3 hours. And the remarkable thing about Fairfax County, a county of 1.2 million people, is that only about 600 people are in that jail, which is remarkable. 600 people in a jail that serves a county of 1.2 million people, and the majority of them are Black, which is startling to go walking floors and floors and floors and floors and looking at the incarcerated population and realizing the majority of them are Black. And it just dovetails with all of this is interrelated. The issues of poverty, the issues of being unhoused, veterans, the fact that that Black people are overrepresented in our jails and in our justice system. It is definitely a crisis. But I tell you, paying attention to the narrative is also really important. How people tell stories. You can think it's facts. You can think, show me the numbers and show me the data is really immaterial. It's the stories that are being told. And I think that's an uphill battle. And I think we as electeds have got to pay attention to who's telling that story and the narratives that are being picked up and what we're going to do about that. So.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Reed. Let me now go to the right side. I believe that Supervisor Garvey had a point that she wants to make or a question.
Kind of both.
Okay.
I really appreciate Supervisor Reed's comments, particularly at the end, which gets to the positive slide that you showed, because sometimes we see this, everybody just kind of, oh, there's just nothing you can do, and it just keeps on going. The fact that we are making progress is good. Also, I believe the reason that it's changed so much since 2020 or 2021, 22 was because the federal government put in lots of money to house people, right? And then all of a sudden after the pandemic, we decided people didn't need to be in housing anymore. I wonder how much, can we quantify that? It might be helpful to have a dollar number for what we need to do or a number of houses so that there's like a goal to get to. And then absolutely systemic racism is hugely there, and it really is upsetting to look at the families. I'm guessing that, and I think you've pointed this out, it's not monolithic. So families, that are homeless have very different needs than the older generation, the older folks, which are probably dealing with dementia. And then somewhere in the middle, I think you probably have a lot of mental illness, which is also the issue. And I think the more that can be broken out, and that's probably what you're doing. I assume that's what the program's all about, because we just can't lump it all together. And I think telling the stories of what it's meant to folks to be housed and get their lives back in order. I mean, the more positive stories we can show, the more I think we'll get to those people who are, thinking, why do we do this? We don't want to help those people, whatever the narrative is. But to help, I think grabbing the narrative is probably a really good idea. So enough of that. But this is a really important topic. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And then Supervisor Walkinshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All of the issues we discuss here are regional, but I think this is one of those issues that is maybe more regional than people realize. And to Mayor Reed's point, I have this feeling every winter I visit the hypothermia shelters that we operate and homeless shelters and rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing around the county. And I think if we woke up tomorrow and miraculously added 1,000 new units of permanent supportive housing in Fairfax County, that would be a great thing. I don't think our numbers would change that much because people are moving throughout the region. And we are a little bit unique, I believe, in Northern Virginia in that in our shelters, we don't require any proof of prior residency or connection to Fairfax County. So folks can come from all over, which is okay. But it is really a problem where if we don't all address it, it's not going to be addressed. And I apologize if you touched on this, and maybe this is part of the Built for Zero work that is to be done. But just do we have any sense of how many permanent supportive housing units we would need to accomplish that goal? Just as we have housing production targets to hopefully reduce the number of people entering homelessness. And we know, all of us are responsible for meeting those targets. Do we have, or will we have through the Built for Zero work, permanent supportive housing targets where we know if we get there, we'll be on track to meet the Built for Zero goals? We have 43,000 right now. Do we need twice as many? Do we need 10% more, 10 times more? What are we talking about roughly?
Sure, I can't answer that number today, but one of the tools that I've seen used with Built for Zero is they call it a takedown chart, which allows communities to track how many people are newly experiencing homelessness, the rate at which people are exiting to permanent housing, and sort of calculate month by month how many housing placements are needed. And that allows communities then to get a sense of what that gap is based on what they are currently able to do and what they need to really drive down that functional zero number. Hillary, I don't know if you would add something, but I would also just point out that we really need to get to the quality data piece first to really understand our active number to get us then to build to that next phase and next development.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was just going to add a quick note to say that though we do have 2030 regional housing production targets, these are all related. And even though that COG, those 320,000 units that we need by 2030 doesn't necessarily break them down by EMI. We know that the greatest need is at the most deeply affordable level. And we do have some analysis about what those numbers look like. I can't take those. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I think, yes, through this tool, we will fine tune and be able to have a better sense at a regional level, kind of what those needs are. But we still have a lot of work to do just to meet our 10-year housing targets. But that will also be part of the solution as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll go ahead and conclude this portion. Oh, okay.
Sorry, I just have one other question.
Yes.
There's a lot of data on specific, like really targeting housing, but I'm curious in terms of even when we provide housing, is that enough? Because in our own experience, we also need wraparound services, right? And so I see the focus on housing, which we need to do, but we're still not going to win unless we're helping people with financial literacy, with addressing the trauma that people have felt. Sometimes there's certain populations, 2 to 3 trauma incidents by the time they are 15 to 17. You just can't get ahead with that. So and when I mentioned the LA model, they're also doing some things like, getting people into care, and they're providing health services. Like that was part of the hook to come in and get services. So you're meeting what people need and then helping connect them to other services. So I just want to think holistically as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Now this will conclude this portion of our agenda. If we can move back, let me just say thank you to both of you for your presentations and thank you for the information, and we look forward to the next steps. So let's now move back to agenda item number 5. So we'll go back to the approval of the minutes from our from our April 10th and May 1st, 2024 meetings. Is there a motion and a second to approve the minutes from April 10th and May 1st board meetings?
So moved.
Thank you, Vice Chair Collins, for the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And thank you, Andrea Bailey, for the second. Are there any abstentions or nay votes on this item? Okay, hearing none, the motion passes. So we'll now move to the consent agenda. So item number 6. Again, we have a resolution on the consent agenda today. regarding approval of updates to COG's Title VI plan and program. Is again on page 16 of the board package. I move approval of the consent agenda. Is there a second? And that was Ms. Garvey. Thank you very much, Supervisor Garvey, for the second. We'll now take the vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, all opposed? Any abstentions? With that, the motion passes. Thank you. So we'll now call back our item, and sorry, we're doing this in reverse order. So we're going to go back to agenda item number 8. So this is again the fiscal year 2025 work plan and budget. So we'll have both our Executive Director, Clark Mercer, and we have our Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Mosseg, here, and they will provide information on the 2024 COG work plan and budget. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Mercer.
Okay, thank you. And I'll be quick and get to Julie. I will just tell you, Julie and her team are doing and have done a fantastic job delivering to you a budget today that was recommended by the budget committee. The first couple slides, I'm not going to belabor them too much because this is kind of preaching to the choir. It's the guiding principles here. I'll just cover 3 quick things. One, I need to get out with my team to your councils and talk with your colleagues about what COG is doing for your jurisdictions. You know much of what COG does. Some of your colleagues may not. So we've got the member benefits document that we put together this past year, but my office will be in touch to hopefully set up a time where I can talk to your councils and supervisors and answer their questions because it's impressive the work that we're doing. 2 thematics that are kind of guiding principles. One, obviously a responsible budget that's balanced to you, that does not overcommit ongoing funds to things that aren't funded. So you'll see a budget just under 60 million, less than a 2% increase from last year's budget. 2, I think the discussion on homelessness really reflects kind of a thematics you'll see from me and this organization. It is one thing to pass a resolution here, whether that is on ending homelessness, pursuing clean energy, getting a tree canopy at 50% for the region, having a world-class transit system. It is another thing to accomplish that goal. And there's moving our staff and our organization more to the mindset of we've set a goal. Now, what are we doing to accomplish it? What tools are we putting in place, working with your colleagues to accomplish those goals? And so whenever we pass a resolution here, the first thing we do when we go back to our office is, okay, we passed that resolution. Our job isn't done. Our job has just begun. So you will see when I do talk to your colleagues, we'll talk about some goals we have set, but what are we doing and what are we doing to push this region to meet those goals? So those are kind of the thematics that makes up the first couple slides, but let's pass it to Julie and get into the substance of the budget. And again, thank you, Julie, and your team for putting together a tremendous budget.
So we'll move to slide 4. I'm not sure who's moving. Thank you. The FY25 budget is about 58.7 million, which Clark alluded to. 50.6 million of that is operating funds and another 8.3 million in pass-through funding. Next slide. The complete FY25 work program and budget is a 58-page document, and a link is included under publications on the June 12th, 2024 COG Board of Directors webpage if you want to look at more detail. The FY25 budget is a $1.2 million or approximately 2% higher than the current FY24 budget. The FY25 budget, as previewed by the Budget and Finance Committee and proposed here, reflects prior year designated fund balance use of $3.6 million. Most of these funds are related to the Amtrak Repower Project, that's about $2.5 million. The Regional Public Safety Fund, about $700,000, and the Clean Air Program, another $400,000. It also results in a use of undesignated fund balance in the amount of $196,000, and this is primarily to meet the federal funding requirement match for TPB. Next slide. So this details the revenues by program area and very, as in with every year that I've presented the budget for the last 5, transportation planning is the bulk of the budget at 40%, at 23.7 million in operating revenue. The majority of this is core Metropolitan Planning Organization work budget that's already been approved by the TPP board. Transportation operations is about 21% of COG's budget and is funding for the commuter connections and some pass-through funding of 4.1 million for enhanced mobility
And in total, transportation programs represent 61% of COG's budget. On the environmental side, water resources, climate, energy, and air quality together total 11 million, or about 19% of the total COG budget. Homeland Security and Public Safety is about 14% of the revenue at 8.4 million, and this is pass-through and operating funds. The pass-through funds are primarily related to UASI, otherwise known as the Urban Area Security Initiative. Community planning and services, strategic initiatives, and member services make up the remaining 5% of the budget and represent core work supported to the Metropolitan Planning Organization in long-range forecasts and strategic initiatives like housing and health planning. Next slide. Back to Clark.
Familiar with the work that's here. Visualize 2050, obviously TPB is undertaking that. Some of you wear the TPB hats are going to be here for another day to discuss transportation projects across the region. A lot on roadway safety. Commuter Connections is the 50th anniversary of Commuter Connections this year. Talked a little bit earlier about some other big projects we're tackling over the course of the coming year for the work program, but I would put transit near the top of that list. Housing and homelessness would be probably the top 2 or 3, and then we'll talk at the retreat about kind of what our role may be or could be in terms of economic development and selling this region kind of writ large. But those are highlights of the 25 work program. Next slide. We have covered those items, so not to belabor those.
Okay, so operating revenue increased 6.4 million or 14.6% over the FY24 work program. And this is driven by additional funding for existing programs, particularly in TPB, about a $1.5 million increase in funding, and a new grant on behalf of the District of Columbia's Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency to develop and deploy a model community engagement and blue-green infrastructure planning framework that can be replicated and scaled across Metro Washington to inform residents of flood risk and identify projects to reduce flood risks. That's about 1.4 million in additional funding. And then an additional DoD grant for base study and local climate planning projects was also included in this revenue forecast. The remaining increase is a reclass from pass-through to operating revenue for securing the city's funds, about 1.3 million. This is just to better align our budget with how our actuals were reported by our outside accountants. So this was really just to try to line up our budget with how the financial statements are presented at the end of the year. So sub-recipient pass-through decreased by 5.2 million from FY24. A big chunk of that is the securing the city's reclass to operating, and then the rest of that is primarily due to there's not an Amtrak repower project in FY25 budget, but there was in FY24, and so that explains most of the difference there. The operating and capital reserves are fully funded at policy level. So that's also a very good news. And as per last year's budget recommendation, we will be moving about $1 million from the operating reserve, or I'm sorry, from undesignated funding that we have into the capital projects reserve to help fund the building renovation that we expect to kick off in early 2025.
Okay. Well, that's the timeline there. We've arrived at the point in the process to hopefully get the budget approved. So, Chair, I will send it back to you for hopefully a motion and second and move the budget forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both of you, for that presentation. So with that, before I take questions, I'd like to make a motion to adopt Resolution R16-2024. And I'll ask, is there a second? Okay, thank you, Mr. Wolf. With that second, is there any discussion? Any discussion? Okay, good. So I will now move to or making sure there's no questions or any comments as well, just making sure. Okay, I'll now move to all those in favor. Please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the ayes have it. So we have an approved motion. So thank you very much. So let's now move to the next item on the agenda, which is item number 10. So we're going to move to DMV moves, an update of that. So for this item, I'll ask our director again, Mr. Mercer, to share a brief update on the DMV moves initiative and the most recent task force meeting, which was held on Monday. So with that, Mr. Mercer.
Okay, thank you. And Kanti Shrikant has joined me, who you know, our deputy and runs TPB. So real quick, level set on DMV moves. The first task force meeting kicked off, like the chairman said, earlier this week in Arlington County. Thank you, Chair Garvey, and our friends in Arlington for hosting. The next task force meeting will be in September. So between now and September, we have a number of work group meetings, and that's where the real heavy lifting for this effort will take place. There's 2 work groups. As a reminder, one of those are your government, your CAOs, your CFOs, your transit operators from all of your jurisdictions. That is a large group. It is chaired by Brian Hill, who is the CAO of Fairfax County. They meet next week. And then we have a community partners group, which is chaired by Jack McDougall, who chairs the Board of Trade. And that includes lots of business groups, environmental, labor groups, stakeholders in the transit community. It is also a large group. The idea for both of these was to have everyone that needs to be at the table in these work groups, so that when we conclude this process, we can hopefully get consensus. But absent getting consensus, we don't want anyone to raise their hand and say, you did not hear from the environmental community, you did not hear a voice from the labor community, you did not hear from the business community. We want all of these folks kind of at the table. So I will turn this over to Kanti in a second to kind of bring us up to speed on the work that he is doing. The 2 facilitators for this process, Nuria Fernandez, who just wrapped up a couple months ago as President Biden's running the Federal Transit Administration. She's terrific. She's run large transit organizations across the United States. And then Nick Donahue, who for the last many years has been at the helm of the Department of Transportation in Virginia as the Deputy Secretary. Folks in Maryland and DC have worked closely with Nick because he's worked on regional projects like Long Bridge and CSX. Both of them, we encourage them to talk to all of you one-on-one individually. They're just terrific at what they do. And I think they can gather information and priorities and pressure points from our members and stakeholders in a way, frankly, that I can't and Kanti cannot. And I think they can do a fair amount of shuttle diplomacy to get us at a set of solutions. We're going to talk about DMV moves at our retreat. There's a public website that has every document that was shared on Monday is on that site. We'll have at the retreat some printouts of documents that we're working on this summer. It'd be helpful to hear from you now as we finalize the schedule for the retreat. We've got our friends from WMATA and Randy Clark committed to attending. We've talked about some lessons learned from other metro areas in the country that have undertaken similar efforts. We heard loud and clear from Mayor Bowser at our joint meeting last month that if there are financial projections or suggestions on revenue sources for transit, that the district would like to see those sooner than later. So I suspect that might be a piece of the conversation at the retreat. But priorities for you as we think about transit moving forward, or items that you want to make sure these work groups are working on, that would be most helpful in the discussion. That was part of the initial level set. Several of you were there, but talking about kind of what transit, what world-class, first-class transit means, and areas that you want us and the work groups to focus on. So that would be the most helpful piece of the discussion, Chairman, is hearing from the members in terms of what we need to be focused on and work product that we need to deliver to you.
Thank you very much. I want to just acknowledge the work that's being done and thank you for leading this effort, Mr. Mercer, and all those that are participating. As you've indicated, this is very important and necessary, obviously, for this region. So I wanted to maybe ask a question on the non-fare revenues and any discussions around that, specifically just thinking about how we might be able to do more as it relates to some advertising, joint development, and I noted there's some reference to fiber optic as well. So just curious, what are the thoughts or initial thoughts? I know you don't have it all finalized, but just trying to get a sense of where that might be headed.
Yeah, the first meeting was very much kind of a level set of what encompasses Metro's budget and transit budget. So those were kind of in addition to fare revenues, obviously leveraging real estate and joint. So we're discussing that. And that's a piece. I think it was helpful, and Conti, you can kind of, the folks that participate in the task force are pretty savvy when it comes to transit Metro.
Right.
But there's a lot in Metro's business plan that folks aren't familiar with. And operating off a common sense of facts and data is really, really important. You hear things like, fares are down and fares should be paying for Metro. Let's level set with how much fares contribute to the operating budget of a WMATA or transit system in this country or worldwide, and really underscoring the notion that transit is a public good, just like a lot of the things that we've chatted about. Obviously, it contributes to their incoming dollars, but there's not a transit network in the world that's not heavily subsidized. And so talking about what those goals should be, and then above and beyond that, is Metro being aggressive enough with some of its joint development? Are we doing enough historically on advertising? What are some of those options? And I think that's, at the retreat, those are some of the points that we would want to put out to. Here are some options that Metro could consider for generating more monies. And what is the gate fee? And what is the percentage of their overall budget? And where are we vis-a-vis pre-COVID to now?
Okay. No, that makes sense. And I'm sorry, Conti, did you want to add something here?
No, that covers it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Let me see if there are any other questions from the group here or any comments. Okay. There are none. So there's no action that we'll take on this item. So we will continue the conversation, as Mr. Mercer said, at the COG Leadership Retreat next month. And then in the meantime, I would encourage anyone who is interested in more information, they can visit www.dmvmoves.org to learn more about the effort. So we'll now move to our next item, and that is other business. Is there any other business that would be considered for the meeting today? Okay. Take that as a no. Looking at the folks on the screen online, making sure I'm not forgetting them as well. I don't see any raised hands. Okay. So then I will allow us then to move to the next item on the agenda, which is the actual adjournment. So with that, I will note that we will be adjourning the meeting today at approximately 1:29. Thank you very much for your participation.